Hey everyone, welcome to the Healthy Team Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Erickson, and this is the show where we dive into real stories behind thriving workplace cultures, exploring everything from wellness and morale to leadership and productivity. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome John Collins, founder of Yogen. And John is an accomplished leader with over 16 years experience driving high impact at some of the world's most recognizable companies, including Microsoft, Apple, and Snapchat. And with a unique blend of corporate expertise and startup grit, John has built and scaled teams across the continents. Now, as the founder of Yogen, John's channeling that experience into transforming the way organizations hire, making the process more human, effective, and even, I dare say, enjoyable. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Mark. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're so welcome. John, let's kick things off by having you tell just a little bit about yourself, your business, and the kind of work you and your team do at Yogan.
Yeah, so a little bit about my background is I started off my career working on the Xbox hardware development team at Microsoft in Seattle. And then I transitioned over to working at Apple on the iPhone team. And then I worked at Snapchat working on their spectacles and augmented reality products. And then wanted to have the experience of working abroad. So I moved to Berlin, Germany, where I was there for 5 years, working at a variety of different startups, including ones that were focused on um, transportation and on e-commerce and on IoT devices before coming back to the United States. And now I've formed my own startup trying to improve hiring processes. Um, this startup that we've created, it's very much coming from pain points that I faced throughout my career. So to give you a little bit of background, having worked in Silicon Valley and in some of the tech hubs across the United States and in Europe, I realized that a lot of companies, whether they're small or large, whether they're American or European, tend to make the same mistakes with hiring. They often are repeating the same processes that they might have done in the past, or copying over what other companies might do. They often don't know the true hiring costs associated with their interview processes, which can be astronomical if it's not kept under check. And there's so much wasted time and effort associated with creating these hiring processes, where they're making candidates go through 6 or 7 different stages. Each stage is having many people involved. And what they don't realize is that that's a really terrible experience for candidates as well. And so it's kind of bad, not only for the companies in terms of wasted effort and cost, but also for their potential future employees and the way that they're first representing themselves to future candidates. And so because of this, this is where Yogan is coming in to really help to try to change the hiring process effectively, hopefully forever.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, John. What inspired you and your co-founders to launch Yogan? I mean, were there specific problems that you were in particular most passionate about solving in that recruitment space?
Yeah, so I've been a hiring manager at many different companies, and I've hired hundreds of people at these various places. And what tends to happen is that the problems start at the very beginning. So whether you're a large company or a small company, you may have access to a recruiter or a recruiter on staff if you're a mid-sized or larger company. But if you're a small startup, you might not have dedicated recruiter, and therefore the hiring manager must step in. But either way, a successful hiring process needs to start from the hiring manager and the recruiter working collaboratively together. And that usually happens with what's called an intake meeting. Some companies have intake meetings, other companies don't, but this is usually just a very simple kind of kickoff meeting for a role to help to define what are the responsibilities, the requirements for the role, who's going to be involved in the process, and then how to properly assess those initial candidates as you're going through a screen. But what happens often is in this intake meeting is that companies are and hiring managers and recruiters often blow it off. They don't give it the necessary um, attention that it rightfully deserves. If they even do the intake meeting, it's often usually just done in like a couple of minutes, just to say like, yeah, copy over what we did in the past, or let's just do the same process that we've done before, and that's not necessarily effective as they're repeating those same mistakes. And then so therefore this induces a black box effect where they're not understanding their true hiring implications and the process and the risks associated with that. So that's our core focus, is really trying to improve hiring from the very beginning by forecasting that risk, helping to make sure that our customers know what are the kinds of issues that they're potentially going to be facing, that they can make an informed decision towards that, be aware of alternative processes that might be better, and to help them be aware of the true costs associated with their hiring. So that way they can make informed decisions about ideally reducing down that amount of time, reducing down that amount of cost, and making a better candidate experience wherever possible. So those are overall our fundamental thesis of what we're trying to solve and our exact area of our expertise.
Awesome. John, how does poor hiring affect team health and cohesion? And how can better hiring prevent issues like burnout and turnover?
Absolutely. Fantastic question. There's multiple points to this story. So there's let's say we have a person who leaves naturally due to attrition or due to a layoff effect. There's still an amount of work that's required, and that work then gets distributed amongst the current staff and the employees. Um, to an extent, employees are willing to be able to handle that increased workload for a certain period of time, as long as they know that there's light at the end of the tunnel and that the company is actively trying to hire and to backfill for that role, or that the work will just be temporary and then will be offloaded on them maybe at the end of the quarter or when that project is done, etc. But either way, that's a very poor experience for employees, and it creates something of kind of like a personal debt that's associated with that. Those employees can expect to either get a promotion or an increased salary or a great performance review associated with increasing that workload. But often this just isn't the case. It's just an expectation that they have to continue performing at that level. And then sometimes under leadership, they're seeing that, oh, well, we're still able to perform our same functions that we were doing before with less people. And therefore, let's try to save the cost and continue that. And that's where we result in burnout. This also has a detrimental effect for increasing the health and personal safety and mental well-being of the staff. So sometimes it can be more publicly attributable, like where we have like Glassdoor reviews that say like there's burnout or there's an unfair workload pressure. You can have issues with having employees stay. So you can have attrition issues where there's high turnover, where employees just aren't accepting of keeping that increased workload for very long. And this is just it's a cyclical effect. And so this can happen when we're not having it be properly staffed accordingly to what is the right and fair workload balance. I think this is sometimes where there's a European mindset versus an American mindset towards that, and we can dive into those in case you're curious a little bit further. But ultimately, a hiring process is just meant to de-risk a hire. It doesn't ever mean that we're going to be 100% confident that this hire is going to be perfect forever. Um, there's a variety of factors that are unforeseen risks, and a hiring process in each one of those stages ideally should be de-risking the process just a little bit more. So, for example, when you first have a screening call with a recruiter, you might be 50% confident that this person's great. After a hiring manager call, you're 75% confident. After a technical interview, you're now 90% confident. After a team interview, you're now 95% confident. And you start having these diminishing effects as you have more and more stages that are there. And in fact, it can even be a little bit detrimental to the hiring process because you're starting to have more voices in the room. It starts becoming a question about who are the decision makers? Like, is it totally up to the hiring manager? Does everybody in the interview process need to agree? Do we need a 51% agreement? These can often cause conflicts, which is part of the resolution that we're ultimately trying to solve, is to say that, well, there's different pros and cons with each of those approaches. Um, but working through this level of being able to bring on somebody, you're never going to be 100% confident, as I mentioned, that this person will be a perfect hire. And that's why you can have situations like a probation period or other tools to be able to make sure that you're providing that level of feedback to an employee, especially in the early days, to make sure that they're performing at the level and expectations that the company and the hiring manager have set. And if it's not working, then at least that person has been given that level of feedback. They've been given a chance to improve. And if they're not meeting those expectations, then you can go through further steps in order to resolve that. But for a lot of employees, when they see that there's work being done to backfill for roles, when they're seeing that we're trying to bring on some people, that can usually alleviate some of that burnout effect, because at least they know that the company is trying, the hiring manager is trying to be able to resolve that. Even if it is ultimately not successful, it's still an avenue that must be done. So yeah, happy to dive into that, but hopefully that answers that question.
That does. Thank you. John, a lot of companies talk about culture fit. How do you help organizations go beyond the buzzwords and hire people who are going to thrive in that company's team?
Yeah, absolutely. I often worry, and I spend a lot of effort trying to think about how to solve for cultural fit. Cultural fit, I think, can sometimes be another way for companies to just have a bias. Like, let's hire people that look and sound like me, or come from the same, university I did, or from the same former company I did, and that can create major problems with groupthink. It has problems with not having that level of diversity that's necessary within an organizations to really challenge those assumptions and to make the best product possible. So cultural fit, I think, is kind of a double-edged sword. Like, you want people that you think will be successful and integrating with the team, but it doesn't mean that you need to hire people that exactly work just the same way that you do. Um, Cultural fit also, I think, it's difficult because some companies will misconstrue cultural fit for, well, they're a good communicator, or they're outgoing, or and this has problems in terms of like diversity with neurodiversity, for example. Maybe people are more shy, maybe people are more reserved, maybe people value their private life a little bit more. They don't necessarily want to go out for to go play some games or something after work. Does that mean that they're a bad cultural fit? I don't think so. I think that means that person, it can still do an amazing job, and I don't think that we should be screening for a cultural fit that means that. Um, so cultural fit is difficult, I think, especially with trying to reduce down bias towards that. I think what's more important in terms of a cultural fit, or bringing in the right kind of mindset within an organization, is, are they willing to challenge the status quo? Are they willing to be able to speak up for what they believe is the right choice? It doesn't mean that necessarily they're right, or it doesn't necessarily mean that the hiring manager is always right, or that the CEO is always right. But what's important is that you've created a safe environment for that person to be able to speak up, and that person feels comfortable in order to do so without having negative feedback or reprimand for being able to voice their opinions. And especially when we're trying to hire experts towards this, I think we often run into problems where we have yes people, that are just going to say yes, yes, yes to everything, and it's not necessarily the right path, or it's not necessarily the best thing for the company. But creating this system of a mentally safe environment where people can voice themselves is incredibly valuable. And to me, that's a stronger cultural fit in the kinds of cultural values that I would try to look for in employees.
Oh, fantastic response. Thank you, John. I couldn't agree more. Um, I think that people just naturally have a tendency to lean towards people that they may have a lot of commonality with. But is that really the best thing for the organization? You're right. We don't need yes people. We need people who are going to be willing to kind of fill in some of the blind spots that we might have in our teams. So that makes so much sense. John, Yogan combines cutting edge technology with human centered design. Can you walk us through how that balance plays out in the Yogan platform?
Absolutely. I mean, this is crucial to our functionality. And when we first established this company, this was a part of our mission statement, is that we didn't want to replace recruiters. I think a lot of other HR software that's really trying to reduce down the cost and time for hiring it has a value proposition towards that by making one recruiter act in the role of 1.5 recruiters. And by doing that, they're expecting that the cost savings will come from reducing down the workforce and letting those recruiters go. Really, what we're trying to do from our purpose and our mission statement is to try to help to enable recruiters to be more effective in their roles and to reduce down areas where there's a lot of time sink. So, for example, that can include administrative work, which is a necessary part of the role, but we try to automate things as much as possible and to make sure that hiring managers and the interview teams are well prepared in order to help to execute on that. That way, recruiters don't need to go chase people, for responses on how a candidate did in an interview. So, diving into this a little bit further, we've taken a very structured approach towards AI within our company. We are an AI first company, as many startups are, but we've taken it in a very specific tone and way. So part of this is due to cost, and part of this is due to functionality. So if there is any part to or any risk associated with somebody using our platform where it could have a potentially negative impact of our value proposition of reducing down the time or costs associated with hiring. For example, if we're trusting in AI to develop a completely brand new hiring process, and it's just like click a button that says generate for me a hiring process. I don't trust that the AI is going to be good enough, accurate enough, or trustworthy enough to be able to create a complete hiring process without the level of detail needed about what are the goals associated with the hiring. How does this company, what kind of roles are they hiring for? What are the specific challenges that this company might be hiring for, et cetera. So because of that, we don't use AI where we could have a negative impact or we're not in complete control over that, where we could lose that level of trust from our customers if we're not producing a good process. But if there's areas where we feel like it could help, but not to the detriment of a functionality for using AI, then we do. Giving a couple of examples. We firmly believe that, my own experience has shown this as well, that people rarely get interview training. If they do, they're very lucky to maybe get like an hour or two per year on interview training, but yet they're being put in front of candidates, they're being told to represent the company. They don't know what questions to ask. They're not prepared for maybe a difficult kind of candidate or maybe certain kind of questions that might come from a candidate, and it produces a negative cycle where the company is then put into a negative light of a person who's representing the company in just a few hours with a candidate, and that's that candidate's only interaction with this place. And so what we have created, like one of our AI features, is to do AI simulated interview training. So we do not accept resumes by design in our program in order to be GDPR compliant. Like there's already other software tools like ATS systems that already handle that. So we do a simulated resume with a simulated candidate, and that simulation you can put in what kind of candidate do you want to interview with. Could be random, which is true how it is in real life, or you could say I want to try to interview with somebody who might be a little bit shy or somebody who might be exaggerating on their qualifications. And then you can go through, and in our AI training, you can ask your real questions. You can try to provide and make the candidate at ease. You can try to make sure that you're going through that interview in a safe and comfortable way without ever having to talk with a real person just yet. And then at the end of that interview training, we provide a report on how you did across what was the quality of your questions. Were they appropriate for that, like that level of seniority? Did you put the candidate at ease? Did you represent your company well? Did you provide feedback in a simulated ATS system effectively instead of just saying like yes or no? Did you actually give like real feedback based on how the interview went? And what this is doing is it creates an environment where people can train on their own, which is helpful, and they can train as many times as they want. They can feel very comfortable with a very specific role or with different kinds of candidates that they might be foreseeing that they might be encountering, and it's in a safe environment. Sometimes it can be kind of awkward to do a training and kind of go through these things in person, but here they can try out different kinds of questions. They can try to push the limits a little bit, and that's a good thing to kind of know, like, where are the boundaries, what kind of questions are good, and how can we make sure that we can make this 30 minutes or this hour long interview as effective as possible. So that's an area where of one specific feature that we have towards AI being very specific and targeted for helping out our users in a safe way where we can trust the data.
Wow, that is really impressive. Thank you. I appreciate that. Um, can I ask a question? Like, what size businesses are your ideal clients?
Yeah, thank you for asking this. So our ideal customer profile is companies that are within around 50 people or so, up to around 5,000 employees. This tends to be a little bit of a sweet spot within this, where they're doing enough hiring that they want to make it a competitive advantage for their company. They could be interviewing candidates that could be talking with multiple different places, and making a great hiring process is kind of like their unfair competitive advantage for pulling in that level of talent. So one is that they're flexible in their hiring. Two is that they value a hiring process. And three, the reason why we're targeting more smaller to mid-sized businesses specifically for the ICP because they tend to be a little bit more flexible for hiring processes, a little bit more experimental. They're willing to try out different things. It tends to be very hard to change the hiring process for a company that might have been established, 100 years ago, and it's been doing the same hiring process for that entire length of time. So our objective here is that teams that want to be able to do this effectively view this as an area where they're either wasting money or they're not sure if they're wasting money, and they can use our tool to see and unlock that black box and get a little bit more visibility in terms of their hiring costs and trying to reduce down that is part of our ICP.
John, you have just a fantastic background. You've worked with everything from huge corporations to startups, and many of our listeners are going to be small business leaders. Could you share what common hiring pitfalls you might see in small teams and how small business leaders could overcome those?
Absolutely. It's a great question. There's a lot of pitfalls, but I find that smaller businesses are incredibly agile for being able to adopt new processes and new best practices. Just a couple of areas here. One is that I would not recommend a pitfall, or I mean, absolutely, I would say don't do this. Is don't copy what the big companies are doing. What works for Amazon isn't necessarily going to work for your company. um, uh, I've been through many interview processes at both small and large companies, and it tends to be that those companies that are smaller might not be able to pay as much as a larger company. But what that also means is that, and this is kind of wild, is that 90% of candidates are willing to choose a company based on its hiring process and not about its salary. So you might not be able to compete on benefits or on a large salary compared to a larger company, but you absolutely can crush the competition for that level of talent from a big company by just making a quicker, better, more transparent hiring process. If you're able to hire somebody in a couple of months or in 1 month, ideally, compared to a larger company, Google, for example, which can often take 6 months or longer to hire a single role, um, people are going to choose you over that larger company. They're not going to wait around for 6 months if they're getting an offer from you. Your a smaller company is this is your opportunity to put your brand out there. It's an opportunity to have people evangelize for you. Even if a person didn't have an offer at the end of it, but they had a great interview experience. They said, "Oh, yeah, it was a really short process. We only had 3 or 4 different stages. Everybody was well prepared. I got asked good questions." They're gonna go post that on Glassdoor. That history is going to be there. Other people are gonna see that as they go forward and into the future. And maybe that door is closed now, but that door could be opened up later. You really don't want to burn bridges in this industry. And so I think one of the pitfalls is don't copy what the larger companies are doing necessarily. Do what you think is best. Also, don't necessarily say what worked before is going to work now. A lot of companies right now are switching over to using a lot of AI tools like HireVue, for example, for doing AI screening. And while that can save companies time and money associated with not having to manually do that screening or have like that 15-minute or 30-minute call with a number of candidates, instead it's using a software tool to be able to do that. That is such a poor experience for candidates. Candidates don't like talking to a robot. this robot is then also judging them. It's giving a score that's inducing bias in the process. It's a negative experience. It's removing kind of that human aspect towards that. And so I would really recommend that, like, before you kind of jump to these other tools that might be really expensive for hiring process, also think about the candidate experience and how that's representing your company towards that. And more candidates now are refusing to even interview at a company that's using these kinds of AI tools. So what kind of talent are you losing out on is another open question. So yeah, those would be some of the pitfalls I would recommend.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you. John, what are a couple of low cost, high impact things that small businesses could do today to improve how they can attract and keep great people on their teams?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I'm going to be a little bit biased here. Yogan, I think, is a very uh, cheap and cost effective way for being able to improve your hiring process. But if it's not the right tool for you, that's absolutely okay. We do offer a free version of our software, and in the free one, you can get a completely free audit for your current hiring process. So it will let you know
Wow.
where your green, yellow, red flags are in your current process, and it'll give you an estimated cost associated with your current hiring process, which for a lot of companies is a black box. A lot of companies think that their current hiring costs might just be, a couple $1,000s per hire, and it's really often more than that if you're factoring in opportunity cost, if you're factoring in all the number of stages and how many people are required to interview that person. And so, if you just want to have a chance to kind of something in 10 or 15 minutes, a really quick level of transparency, they can visit our site at getyogen.com and understand that more. But there is a number of other tools I think that are really valuable. Assuming that companies might not have the budgetary resources for investing in a lot of software tools. I'm quite a big fan of TidyCal compared to Calendly. So scheduling is a major pain point with hiring managers and with recruiters trying to schedule it with candidates. It's often much easier to just provide your calendar, and a candidate can choose what works out best for them based on that availability. Um, Calendly is a pretty expensive option, but TidyCal does 95% of the same functionality for a one-time usage cost, and it's very cheap for a team cost, and it's in kind of this day and age, it's not a subscription; it's just a one-time license. So I'm a big fan of that. If you're even struggling with scheduling, it's quite powerful. I mean, the level of AI tools that are out there. So as we're developing Yogan, we're using Cursor, we're using Anthropic's Claude, ChatGPT, and Google Gemini, which has come out with new versions recently. I mean, for us, and if companies are a little bit more price sensitive towards this, there's no reason to stay loyal to any of these AI companies. You can definitely hop around, and there's a lot of functionality that kind of remains similar between them. But like Google Gemini, for example, right now is offering their latest model for free, but they do train on your information and your data that you're providing. But if that's something that you're okay with, and you're okay with just trying to create, like, for example, proof of concepts or MVPs, and not necessarily production level quality things, you can use Google's AI Studio for free, and it's incredibly powerful. Um, just as, and we can dive into this in case your audience is curious as well, but like the number of tokens, which is like how much input and output you have for some of these AI tools. Um, Google's is 10 times more than some of the other competitors right now, and it's currently free, but they'll charge later. And then, it's a tight market, and what I'm saying now might change in a week or two from here. And the level of sophistication that some of these AI tools are coming out with is just incredible. So, I mean, it's more than just kind of like a a Google search replacement, and just kind of like chatting and getting a response. It can really be opportunities where you can brainstorm together with an AI, or you can develop very quick mock-ups to be able to make sure that you're going down the right path. And these tools are becoming better and better, even for people that aren't necessarily software developers. Yeah, so it's quite wild, and all of these are very cheap or free to use.
Yeah, that's amazing. John, what's one myth about hiring or recruiting that you wish you could debunk for every business leader out there?
Oh, I love this question. I mean, there's so much I want to debunk, but I would say that less is more. Maybe this is a lot of companies think that they need to have a lot of stages in order to be able to effectively hire or to de-risk, and that what often happens is there's too many cooks in the kitchen, or you have the situation where the team says, "Oh, we really want to talk with this person," and so you now have a stage where you're going to have 5 people be a part of that interview loop, but really trying to think about the candidate experience. I mean, what happens if you have somebody who feels a little bit uncomfortable, giving a presentation in front of people? I mean, that's the number one fear that people have. And you're asking them in the interview stage to give a presentation to a team. And it's like, that can be nerve wracking. That can be scary. And it's like, well, if you have 5 people on the other side of the table interviewing a candidate, are all 5 going to actively participate in the interview process? Are they all going to actively ask questions? I mean, if you have an hour with them, and that means that they're each going to be asking 1 or 2 questions. Is that really an effective use of everybody's time? It becomes incredibly difficult, and there's been psychology studies on this about scheduling. And once you reach 4 or 5 people, it becomes nearly impossible to find a proper calendar time that fits out for everybody. So keeping meetings to like 1 or 2 people is ideal, and it's much more flexible. So I really kind of challenge companies to for that status quo, that you don't necessarily need to have every one of those stages maybe that you've had before, or that you need to have everybody be a part of the interview loop. I know this might upset some teams, or some people might not feel included, but there's aspects where you can make them feel included by like keeping them up to date about the status, or maybe having them be part of a pool of interviewers, and that way you can have some backup people in case somebody is unavailable. These ways can make sure that you're making effective use of everybody's time. And I'm a firm believer of less is more, and there's the diminishing of return on having additional interview stages. So I think that's one of the biggest myths, is that companies need to be 100% confident in a candidate, and therefore, because there's so many applicants, especially in this current economic climate, that they will put people kind of through the gauntlet, and have them have a lot of stages in order to really make sure that it's the right candidate. But it's not good for the company or for the candidates themselves. And so really recommending to do the minimal number of stages to get the right information that's needed would be my advice.
Well, great advice that indeed. I appreciate that, John, and appreciate your time. This has been a terrific conversation. Thank you again, John, for joining us and sharing
Thank
your
you.
insights on building healthy teams. Before we wrap up, John, can you let our listeners know where they can find you and learn more about Yogan?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. There's a couple of places. One, they can contact me on LinkedIn. My username is John Christopher Collins. Happy to chat with any of your listeners. It can be a great source for us to engage on conversations. And if they'd like to visit our website, it's https://getyogan.com. At our website, we offer the free trial that I mentioned towards audit functionality. No credit card or anything required. You can just create an account, and try to understand your current hiring costs. If you'd like to be a part of one of our early users, and check out some of our beta features before they're released to the public, definitely get in touch with me on LinkedIn. Happy to have you. And yeah, we're going to be launching here very soon, and we're very excited to be having a product that can get into people's hands. And we hope that this will not only improve the hiring experience for candidates, but also for the companies, and to greatly reduce annual costs and effort required.
John, that really does sound like the proverbial win-win, where it's absolutely a win for the company and also for the candidate as well. So better use of everybody's time using intelligent tools and a sound process, from the get-go, from the very beginning.
Thank you.
So,
Absolutely.
so, John, thank you again so much. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to the Healthy Team podcast. And as always, if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like and subscribe and share it with your team or anybody who is passionate about great workplace culture. And we'll be back soon with more conversations to help you build stronger, healthier teams. And until next time, stay well and lead well. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.